Talofa lava and welcome to the Global Pasifika Success Podcast. I'm Andrew Fa'avali, your host. Every week I'll be chatting with successful Pacific people from across the globe, unpacking their stories and more importantly, picking out insights, lessons and golden nuggets you can use to live your best life too. Well, thanks. This week on the Global Pasifika Success Podcast, I have Deacon Manu, currently based in Singapore, a former professional rugby and international for Fiji. As well as playing in Super Rugby for the Mighty Chiefs and a little bit for the Blues. And then headed abroad to Wales and also coached in Hong Kong, now a teacher in Singapore. He's got more degrees than an oven from what I've read of LinkedIn. And he's also a father and a husband and a father of three children.
3 children, yes.
3 children. So yeah, well, it's a privilege and an honor to welcome you, Deacon Manu, to the show. So Vinaka and Bula.
Bula Wanaka, thank you for having me. Been listening to your show. Some wonderful stories that have been shared across the Pacifica. I think they're really important, and just doing a great job.
Cool, man. Well, you must be pretty stoked. Last week, I think it was, where Fiji, had that historic win against England. Shall we start there? What were your thoughts? How do you reckon it's led to this, that a tier 2 nation has come to beat the mighty England team on pretty much the home of rugby, Twickenham? What do you reckon about that?
Yeah, it was a pretty amazing experience. I was actually with a number of coaches from England. We were watching the game, and they were on edge throughout the whole game, and the twists and turns of it were just sort of heart pounding. I could just almost imagine myself back playing, just feeling those experiences. But to see that, just the way they did it, I think as well, you can sort of have a win and maybe just get lucky, but I think they were well deserving of it, and just the discipline that they showed, and just the resolve to be able to shut down that line out drive and those little subtleties that you can see. I think that was just such an amazing triumph. It sort of sets a marker out there, not just for this Rugby World Cup, but for further development down the track. And I think that the Drua had a massive part in that. A lot of the players were in there, and I think just that development over there. I think when previously World Cups, the one that I was involved with a number of years ago, I think half our team were professionals. Now they're all professionals. They all at least had 18 months conditioning, and to see that starting to see those fruits of all of that coming through, was emotional to see that at the early hours here in Singapore.
Yeah, so we talk about the draw and, obviously the time together, a time in a professional environment, but also the time together with that cohesion and the cohesiveness that they've got and they've built up. How important do you think that is in terms of factoring in success over time and the elements of success?
Yeah, I think it is a huge, you talk about success as being like little micro habits that are created over time. And, you see Drew being able to knock over some of those bigger teams this year. And I think, those habits have been created over the last 2 years. You are what you constantly do. So I think those habits that have been starting being ingrained, and then that's really flowing through. And, you bring the likes of other players from top French clubs, top UK clubs into the mix. It creates quite a dynamic scene. A Fijian team are known for their attacking ability, but that first half, there was a massive kicking game. So just probably the intellectual property that's been sort of developed over that Super Rugby, their game management. That was a big thing for me watching that game.
Yeah, I go back to 87, man. I was a big fan in the 87 World Cup. I remember Corridor running down the sideline of Eden Park and then the ball getting punched out of his thing, Paulo Nawalu and all those legends of that first World Cup. You're right, there was the attacking flair, but we've got a more holistic game in the Pacific game now. There seems to be another kind of policy thing that happened, which was, not so much for Fiji, but for other clubs. If you played tier 1, you can play tier 2. How do you reckon that fit in? Do Fiji have any former All Blacks or anything in it? This might be a really good point, actually.
Yeah, not as much as like eligible players as Samoa or Tonga. But I think just having that there is really important, that they're able to come back and play their country of birth or their parents' birth. I think that it's a wonderful thing to be able to do to represent both sides. And I think some people sort of look at it in mixed terms, thinking they should choose one. But when a Fijian makes the All Blacks, they're still Fijian,
Yeah.
regardless of who they're playing for. And Fiji will get behind those players, just because we understand where they've come from. And I think having that role is just I guess an added bonus to be able to sort of strengthen those Pacific Island teams.
Yeah, and I think actually Fiji kind of bucks the trend there because they haven't got as many as Tonga and Samoa, and yet they're probably like shown that they're more successful. And I remember hearing Simon Raiwalui, the coach, saying, "Oh yeah, that's a great rule, but we're not really going to engage in that. We're thinking about our pathways, and we're confident in the talent pool that they had on island and the ones who had committed solely to Fiji." And so that's a bit of a buck against the trend, eh? It shows pathways is really important and just the upskilling, the bonding, and all that kind of developmental stuff.
Yeah, definitely. I think with Fiji, a little bit more unique in terms of the infrastructure in
Mm.
Fiji. Infrastructure is a lot bigger than, say, the Samoa or the Tongan Rugby Union, where they've got sort of pockets, obviously big populations in Australia and New Zealand. But Fiji are probably fortunate enough to have that academy systems coming through, and they've been around for many, many years. And it's good to sort of see that they are investing in that there. But critical numbers sort of dictate for Samoa and Tonga that they need to look overseas, to get those players, that are previously played for other countries. So I think there's a little bit of different dynamics there, playing out. But kudos to Fiji for really just backing, the players and what they've got in the structures there.
Yeah, I think about Penrith Panthers in the NRL, and they went hard on building their pathway. They lost for a little bit, and then now they look like they'll go into another final 3 times in a row before a lot of their core players leave for other clubs, and at a higher market rate. But let's go back to your career then, if that's all right. It started back in you were born in New Plymouth, and what's your cultural tale?
Yeah, my cultural tale. My dad is Maori, so that's our whakapapa is based around Taranaki and up in Waikato. So I sort of grew up as identifying more of that, being not being and based in Fiji. But then my mum came over from Fiji when she was in her late teens, to, I guess, start a new life, like a lot of Polynesians, Pacific Islanders would come over, to see the opportunities here. So I grew up in a mixed race family, in terms of that, and some of the um, cultural things that identify with Pacifica and Maori. It was very very similar. Family was a big thing. I grew up with a big family, lots of cousins, and cousins of cousins. So it was a great childhood, especially in New Plymouth. There's not much going on down there, at the best of times, but in terms of a place to grow up and get nurtured, I think it was a great childhood to have there.
Yeah, cool. I've only been to New Plymouth once, man, but it was freezing, man. It's
when the wind
beautiful that you're sitting under the mountain, but it's cold as, eh?
Yeah, it actually can be a bit cold during the winter when that breeze comes off. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's an amazing place, and I think it got, like, strangely enough, because it wasn't ever there when I was living there. The sunshine capital of New Zealand.
Oh,
Um,
really?
yeah, I was surprised when I heard that too. But yeah, so it's so many good things about it. But it is a bit of a destination in itself. It's not somewhere you generally go through,
Yeah.
which kind of
So
makes it.
so your high school produced some top rugby players as well, eh? You want to just talk about your
Yeah,
high school years?
yeah, we didn't really have a huge pedigree of players. Then sort of we had a couple of players that actually made into Super Rugby. Then from there, we've got a long list,
Yeah.
of All Blacks, Centurions, and the All Blacks. It's Conrad Smith, the Barrett brothers, and a list of players. And if you're looking back at my school, it's only a very small school. Francis Douglas of when I was there, it was 500. I think it's maybe 700 max, and that's from 11 years old through to you finish to university or whatever you go to on after. So it was very isolated, very small. But rugby was in sport in general was part of the DNA of the college.
So what were your main sports at school?
It was actually golf. It was golf. That was sort of the one that I really did. My claim to fame is being able to caddy for Michael Campbell
Oh,
when I was a teenager. Yeah, when he came over, he came to New Plymouth as an amateur golfer, won the tournament there, and I got a caddy for him. And back then, the amateurs played 2 rounds a day. But then I sort of grew a little bit more. That was sort of when I was about 13, 14. My body shape wasn't quite good for golf. And it sort of grew. Then one of my mates said, "Oh, look, come and have a go at the at rugby." Had to put on those boots, to sort of have a look back and just played it because I just wanted to play with my friends. That was really important to me, is that those connections.
did you always know you were going to uni, and why did you choose environmental planning?
Yeah, I think the environmental sciences was just something that was sort of quite topical at the time. And being a young person at the time, you want to make some changes that you can sort of see that were necessary. You probably see that today, further down the track, 20 plus years, sort of the impact of that. That was something I was really passionate about. It was probably one of my strengths. In terms of that, then yeah, just went up to university, and yeah, predominantly just wanted to study and just keep studying right down there. Really enjoyed just the scene of it. Obviously going to university, but just the connections that I made through there. And rugby sort of just snuck up, and there was an opportunity. Someone sort of spotted me. I made a couple trials later on after I actually finished my degree, and then from there, it sort of went pretty quickly and escalated.
Yeah. So did you go straight through and pass your degree within the allotted time?
Yes, yeah, I did my degree, and actually my postgrad year is when I made the Waikato team. And I remember one training, it was quite early on. I was late because I had to do a presentation for my postgrad year. And I was late only by a couple of minutes, but having to do extra running and fitness, I was like, oh, gutted. But yeah, that was just part and parcel, just trying to balance both those things out on that, pretty important year.
Yeah, but that speaks to a lot of discipline to balance your academic and your sporting pursuits. So how did you? For me, it was like a matter of stamina, and I say this because I started a law degree at 18 or yeah, 18, and I finished it at like 26. I had lots of years off in between, and so when I hear people go straight through and then do post grad and stuff like that, it speaks to me about something that I didn't have, which was the stamina to do it, the concentration stamina, and then just the focus, especially at those years where and uni in a uni context where man, like there's a lot of distractions. How did you stay on task?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm probably still asking myself that then. But yeah, I guess having that balance and being able to dip in and dip out of different things, like I'd be able to go to a lecture and then be in a whole different world on the rugby field, getting some of those frustrations out, was important. But that's your social network, that's your connections you have. I'm still, some of my closest friends are from that first year university. We built such a strong bond in that community, going to classes together, and we didn't really want to let anyone down as well. And I guess looking back, it did take discipline, but for me, that was just part and parcel of university. I can always imagine my mum standing over me, telling me to study harder and longer. That sort of nightmares of that, and waking up in cold sweats in the middle of the night if I didn't. That sort of was one of the drivers. Was my mum, who understood the importance of education, and how that can, I guess, change generations of people if you're able to just apply yourself.
You took up rugby late, but you made rep rugby early, though. You know what I mean? So you took it up in the last years of high school, and then, like I mentioned prior to, we played in the Auckland versus Waikato under 19 final. Was that? Did you make schools as well?
No, I didn't make New Zealand schools or New Zealand 19s or anything like that. It was just my last year of New Zealand under 21s that I made
Oh,
that team there. So that was a unbelievable team. Players like Kevin Mialamu, Tony Woodcock, Jerry Collins,
mm.
like Jerry Collins. We had Richie McCaw there, Ronnie Soialo. So we had a pretty rock star kind of pack. So it was amazing to be part of. That was my first experience of playing that international type setup.
Awesome. And so, what was it like being a? So you were living away from home.
Yes.
You're at university, and then you make the. Do you make the NPC team, or do you make the Chiefs first?
Made the NPC team.
Yeah.
So I had just gone and taught over with New Zealand universities, and it was really my first time overseas. We went to Japan for 3 weeks, playing, like against the Japanese side. They had Aaron Pene and Jamie Joseph playing for them back there. And from there, came back and we got named in the Waikato team within a month. Going back to Japan, so my first cap for Waikato was against the Japanese. But just basically that first year, as a young prop, a young person, didn't get much game time, just the pre-seasons and on the bench for a lot of it. They had some veteran props there and that, and the timing for me and my career was timed it pretty right. A lot of the players were sort of moving on from there, and I was able to sneak an opportunity that following year.
Cool. So, what was your postgrad degree in?
Yeah, I did marine biology.
Oh,
That was
come
what I
on.
did. And then from there, I just keep studying. For me, it was a way to be in a different environment
Yeah.
from what I was, and something that I really enjoyed. Just trying to learn new things is important for me. It sort of helps my development. And we talk about well-being. That's the thing that I love to do, is just learn new things, new experiences. For me, is a major part of my DNA.
So, can we just cover the degrees? Because I think it's an insight into your interests and the things that spark you at different times. So, you've got an undergrad degree in environmental planning, a postgrad degree in marine biology,
Yes.
um, and then what else do you have?
I've got a business degree as well from Massey University, and did a postgrad there with HR, human resources.
Ah,
Then I went through to do a degree in applied management, strategic management, and sports management. And that was through Open Polytech, Otago Polytech, and that was a great degree. And I learned a lot more about myself in those times doing that then, and some parts of the other qualifications. Then I went through and did a PGCE, so a teaching qualification there, and currently doing working through my thesis with Otago University. And that's a real big focus on Pacific Islander rugby and their well-being, and how the Western models are used for Pacific Islander rugby, but it's not really having that outlook of some of the key well-being models that are out there for Pacific Islanders, especially when they travel overseas. And that's sort of something that I'm pretty passionate about, and something I think that's needed. There's not a lot of research out there at the moment. We've got some fantastic supervisors down at Otago University that have been amazing to be able to just bounce ideas off them and really just generate something that's hopefully going to be adding to the literature out there.
so is that a PhD thesis?
Just a master's
Master's
thesis.
thesis?
Going to work my way up to that eventually. I think
Through the
that,
masters into the PhD?
yeah, that's sort of the ultimate goal. It's one of the dreams I guess I have, to be able to just keep contributing to that body of knowledge.
Cool. So you've kind of gone from a science kind of you got gone from science and you went into business. What sparked your interest into business, HR, and applied management?
Yeah, I always wanted to, I guess, be a business owner. I've run various businesses over the years, just small sort of holdings and that sort of developed. And you always learn lessons when you are doing business. And I think the lessons that you learn are more about yourself and how you react to different situations. Yeah, there's lots of learning to have, of doing things this way or that. But I think the biggest thing for me was learning myself. We had a couple of rugby guys. We decided to have a smoothie company where
Awesome.
we applied for the Waikato rugby team and the Chiefs. But then the time pressures sort of went away, and we weren't able to really go do that. Have a sports management company as well. that does things like events, and then guest speaking, and then just do a range of other things. One of the things that we did in a university with one of my friends was, I'm not sure if you've seen the line out lifters, that they strap on onto their legs. Yeah, so we invented those, and we went through that patent process, right throughout university. So that was kind of a cool thing to be able to do. Then just that marketing of it, getting players' faces to it. But with patents, if you change it just a little bit, someone else can copy it. So
Yeah.
the actual design of the other ones came through, and they sort of flooded the market with sort of cheaper versions than we could produce.
So let's talk about business if that's all right. What's the
Yeah.
big plan in business? So you've gone through those three, the smoothies, the sports management, and the lifters. Um, this is all kind of, business is a path of many different milestones. What's the big dream in business?
For me, it's probably that non-profit sector, is just contributing back. A number of years back, we had Pacific Rugby Players, formerly known as Pacific Island Players Association,
Yeah.
and being a founding member, and current chairman. That is something that I think is important, and to be able to give back and contribute. For me, it's not about having a big successful company that I'm going to sell on or anything like that, but it's actually giving back. And the more you give, the more you actually receive in a lot of ways. For me to be in an opportunity that I am able to do that, to have a skill set that I can keep contributing, I think that's important, to be able to use those God-given talents that I've been given.
Cool. So if we dive into that, then the old PIPA, now Pacific Rugby Players, what's the mandate for that? What's that about?
Yeah, we started. There was you could have a write a 5 volume books about some of the stories from the Pacific over the years, and basically it was looking for two things. One was making sure we were equally leveled, in terms of the player rights, making sure our flights were covered, that they weren't like a 32-hour flight around the world to play for your country, and also making sure that the players were looked after off the field. Different dynamic to, say, the England, where a lot of them have come from the private schools, highly educated. We were dealing with a big spectrum of players, and just making sure that they were looked after from that academy setup, right through, and they were just educated, pushing that education again so that they could make those right decisions, throughout their career. There were instances of players going to Romania, getting dropped off there, for, I think, like €200 a month, not speaking any language, not used to the food, not knowing where to go. And I just wanted to see that stopped. So myself, Hale Tipo, and also Mahonri Schwalger. We were all playing internationals then, for our respective countries, and that was something that we wanted to get off the ground. We had similar things, so rather than having separate players associations, we combined together, because we had similar things, and that was probably one of the key things of that strength of, being together in those intertwined Polynesian roots together, that gave us that leapfrog, and being able to get accepted and have a table at World Rugby. That's a big thing for us, and we've got really good relationships with all the rugby unions. But in the end, we are there for the players, and making sure that they're getting everything that they need. And some of those things that the Fijian rugby team had, or the results, in some way we had a lot to do with on the backfield, of it. Like, we have a person in Fiji educating the Fijian Drua, running workshops there, making sure that, after they finish playing, they're still able to help their families. With Pacific Islanders, you're always giving to your family, and for me, it is being able to give after you finish playing rugby. So investing in yourself and your education, so you can contribute into your village. That was a big thing, and a big push for the Pacific Rugby Players to, I guess, get a foothold, for those players in World Rugby.
Yeah, it's a really important field. I remember when I was researching, and right now we've got these schemes like the RSC scheme and the Palm scheme where they're built around labor mobility, but we mostly think about labor mobility and global labor mobility through the lens of picking picking fruit, or there's, really basic skilled occupations and stuff like this. And then I remember reading a paper by Nico Besnier, who's a sociocultural anthropologist, talking about how global labor mobility also, relating it to sports and athletes. And this was about in 2013, I think I read this, and it really spiked my mind. It was about how, for sports and athletes, they're using um, their bodies is really the product. And it was a bit of a ruthless way to put it, but it is, quite the reality as well. So to have the well-being and to have all these associations and unions kind of that are around there protecting the well-being and the sustainability of family and things like that are really critical. So that's really great. Um, and it's an important piece moving forward. Is so you're now the chair of Pacific Rugby Players?
Yeah, I was the chair originally as well,
Yeah.
and then just with rugby and work and the transition, sort of took a step back. Still been on the board, making some decisions there, but yeah, just wanted to step up and really sort of just start progressing things. Lots going on in Pacific Island rugby.
Yeah.
A lot of it's unseen, which is great, but a lot of it, comes to a head in lots of ways, and we just try and mitigate a lot of those things. And really, is a lot to do with communication, just that dialogue between two parties or three parties, and just getting them around that table. Because everyone wants to do their best and get the best out of everything. And I think sometimes it's just understanding the different perspectives where they're at, and just I guess negotiating what that looks like for everybody, so there's a win.
This kind of relates to, and this is quite political, but the voting rights for each nation. I know that's been kind of a big debate, and then the match fee share, things like that around. If Pacific Islands go into the Northern Hemisphere, they often don't get the match fee share, whereas the All Blacks do, etc. What are the main kind of priorities for the association or the Pacific Rugby Players? Um, because it's a really pivotal time. Australia, Samoa, Tonga, they're doing pretty well on the international stage. It's probably a really good platform for you guys to um, make some moves in some priority areas. What are those priority areas for you guys at the moment?
Yeah, it's still evening the field out. I remember playing over in Twickenham's captaining Fiji against a packed out, sold out Twickenham, and the security guard at that game actually got paid more than myself for the week being with Fiji. And that was the discrepancies. I remember the England Rugby Union coming to our team meeting, looking at our shoes, and some of us were wearing sandals, some of them were in shoes, and they went out and bought us shoes so it would all look part of a team. Um, but you can't, I guess, go against what they're doing. They've put together a really good marketing proposal. They own their stadium. They do a lot of their hard work, but we're not sort of looking to take a big, large slice of the pie, but we are looking to even things up, especially when it comes to things like TV rights. I think that's a big one. It's always a one that's politically motivated in lots of ways. But I think, the world wants to see some equality with that. And it may not be a 50-50 share, but something more than just the crumbs off the table is something that we're looking to keep pushing and keep striving for. And you can sort of see that investment in Pacific Island Rugby with Moana, Pasifika, and also the Drua. After 2 years, seeing that development from there, and just with a little bit more funding, a little bit more resourcing, I think they can be world players, and take the things to the next level.
I always take it back to the Olympics and the sevens, and you look at the Fijian sevens program winning those two golds. The first one was Ben Ryan in his book. I loved his book, and it talked about how he had all this kind of understanding from England and working in their program, and then what he had to do, he had to go out to the families and see wives, and they
Yeah.
had no shoes, and he took his speed gates, and they were irrelevant in the first part of his coaching there. He just had to build relationship. But man, if you look at the resources behind them and the difference in it in the how the programs are funded and then the results, man, if that happens, if the 15s get a little bit, like, I can see the Pacific players being the true champions and the giants that we actually are. But so congratulations on that work. It's really timely and it's really important. I just want to flip back into your career. You went into Super, and I just want to touch on some of your favorite coaches and what made them your favorites, and just what was your lens in terms of their fostering of successful teams.
Yeah, that's a really good thing. I've been fortunate. I've had a number of amazing coaches, All Black coaches, international coaches, and I think the best coaches for me were able to build those relationships up. We talk about that in education, to be able to foster those relationships and make them really personal. So looking back at some of those coaches, I think when I was in Waikato, I had some amazing coaches. Not so much technically, or tactically, but in terms of that relationship, we had a guy called Kiwi Sharank and Farrell Tamada, who really probably saw something that I probably couldn't have seen in myself in terms of my ability, and to have people of that generation and to respect them, what was pretty huge for me. A guy was just at university, just playing with my mates, to sort of having these people like believe in you. It was kind of almost like an obligation. I didn't want to let them down, and they felt like they probably didn't want to let me down. So having those people there in place was amazing. I think people like Ian Foster, who was able to harness those relationships as well, but also in the same time, very very smart, very tactical, very technical in terms of his ability. I think he was one of the ahead of his time in lots of ways there. Having John Mitchell as well. John Mitchell, he was pretty intense when I first came into Super Rugby. He probably scared me more than any other coach. But then having him a few years later, he sort of, after he'd gone to the All Blacks, and he was sort of changed and did things a little bit differently. And he, as a sign of him as a person, being able to change his style of coaching and really reflect on how to deal with different situations. Overseas, it was a little bit different. Over playing in Europe, where it's almost treated more as a job. And those relationships weren't strained, but they were a little bit different in New Zealand, where, and you probably Razor was a good example of Crusaders, of just that real care for you and your family and understanding what was going on. And I think that's one of the big things that I did miss going overseas, was that actual genuine care for you as a player and as a person, as opposed to going overseas. It's almost, you come to rugby, you do your job, then see you later. So that was a bit of a mind shift that a lot of players go through, and you just sort of almost get into that culture of going to work, doing your job, then after that, you're back with your family.
Kind of aligns with that global labor mobility thing. But I don't know much about John Mitchell, but I remember when he came out with, like, line out jumpers with attachments, and the bench were finishes and stuff like that. That was, and he had all this language. It was almost like neuro linguistic programming. Um, do you think that kind of scientific or psychological approach works, and did it work for you?
Yeah, I've always been into the scientific approach, like the visualization. I was reading books because I knew it was such a powerful thing that, now it's talked about. Teams have sports psychologists, but I was reading books like that when I was first starting out,
Mm.
making these teams. I knew I had to have some sort of edge from the other players, and I'd always visualize the game and put myself in situations where was a really tough situation, so that my mind had already seen what my body was about to go through, and I never put my body through something that I had not already imagined. And for me, that was a powerful tool to be able to do that, because when I came to a situation, I knew what to do. I'd already played it through my head, and that was important for me. So having those sort of little key areas, I think for me helped me develop a lot quicker. And I guess, as you mentioned, I was a sort of a late starter, but having not been in that structured environment, and being able to sort of look at some literature and understand, what it did to me, that sports psych was important. And I was fortunate enough in Hong Kong when I was coaching there to do a week's course, it might have been an 8-day course with neurolinguistics programming. That was probably the best course I've been on,
Awesome.
just to understand, how people work, and the coaching philosophy and the language that you, as you mentioned, you do use is so critical.
Yeah. So if we can jump to your coaching, so you played at Hong Kong Cricket Club. It's one of the more prestigious clubs there. I actually played at Causeway Bay for a little bit. Yeah, we were all locals. We were all locals except for two of us from me and a dude from Northland. But Hong Kong Cricket Club is really esteemed, and they got really good resources. Like in terms of your coaching, how did you set it up for success? Did you have a senior leadership group, or did you do those kinds of things to foster self-led teams?
Yeah, I'm always into self-led teams. That's a big thing for me, is giving them a lot of autonomy to make those decisions. It was a little bit different from there, as opposed to like a full-on professional environment. A lot of these guys were pilots, bankers,
Yeah,
personal trainers. I remember a number of times guys would come to training, would train at 7:30 to late, and then they go back to the office and close a deal, or be back for another 3 or 4 hours at work. So having a bit of empathy and understanding the situation where those players were, but having a senior leadership team is important. They're the real drivers. They're the people that are doing it on the field, but just making things simple. Trying to take the complex and make them really, really simple, I think, is important, because these guys are heavy hitters in the financial world, and all sorts of industries. So just being able to come back, bring them together in a succinct way that's not going to overload their brain, and being able to build that. And we had great success over the years with them.
awesome, man. So you've gone from New Zealand, you went over to Europe and played there for a long time. You've headed over to Asia and got into coaching. Um, you're a foundation member of Pacific Rugby Players. Uh, can we talk about your journey around? What about your off-field investments and stuff like that? Financially, have you been have you been mentored in the financial management of, your finances and stuff like that?
I haven't per se had a mentor, but for me, I get pretty focused, and will start reading and trying to find out as much information as possible about a subject, no matter what it is. And for me, it's hitting the book straight away. It's something that I'm used to, and just watching now. Like watching a lot of commentary, listening to podcasts, and sort of understanding the dynamics of what's going on. It's so fortunate to be able to do that at an early age, and growing up in a family that didn't have much. So I don't live a fancy life or anything like that. I live pretty frugally, and that's just probably from my mum's side. And to be able to do that, I think living within your means, even when you're playing, and a lot of people would buy the big fancy cars, buy the big fancy houses, but for me, it wasn't about that. It was setting up my children for a better future, and something that I think is really important is just be able to give something further down the track. I remember at university, you probably remember it as well, like getting a student loan out.
Yeah.
So you draw it down, you hit with 8% interest, and it's only like the first day of university, and that just accumulates. So being able to, I guess, make those decisions early on in my career, what was important just for the longevity of myself. I knew I wasn't going to play forever, and to be in education now, it's fantastic. To be at one of the international schools and still being able to coach and give back to the community.
So in terms of wealth creation, what kind of books were key for you over the years? Do you remember?
Yeah, it was a new book at the time, but Rich Dad Poor Dad, that was always a good one to read. But just reading about investments, all sorts of books like property books that were out there. I actually used to go to the bookshops, the secondhand bookshops, and just pick up them and read them. So for me, just trying to educate in that sector, as well as just talking to people, connect with people, and have a chat to people that are in the know. That's what I do like about rugby. Is just some of those connections that you can make. People that have been doing it for all their lives, they'll be able to assist and maybe give advice and lead on to something else. So that's sort of the main books that I looked at, and I still read and still investigate about what's going on. Like the world's changing so much. You talk about the boom in cryptocurrency, then you're looking at the AI models coming out, and what's going on, the war and the Ukraine. All having these dynamics, and it's sort of hard to understand what to do and what to invest in, especially with inflation. So it's an interesting world that we currently live in.
Yeah, it might be more interesting because Singapore's a financial hub and it might be around more than, the general conversation around New Zealand and Australia. Do you feel that is how it is?
Yeah, it's amazing. Like the development in Singapore is phenomenal. They're very fortunate enough to have a government that's been in for decades, and with that, they're able to plan 10, 20 years ahead with certain infrastructure things. And once they set a plan, they just go and do it. Whether it's a new train line, whether it's a new park, whether it's a redevelopment, that's what I really appreciate it. Those kind of things here that they don't wait around. They just get things done. And it is a great place to live in terms of just the ease of life and getting around.
You've done so many diverse things. So I'm interested in, this Maori Fijian dude from New Plymouth. His path has gone all the way through New Zealand, pretty much to the top of the world, sitting around Asia. What's next for you?
Yeah, it's a good question. For me, I've always got that burning desire to study and do that PhD. That would be my one of my dreams to do that, and just keep contributing to the Pacific Islands. That's given myself so much, and to be able to do that and just get my three kids who have lived overseas for since they were a lot of them. My eldest, who's 18, he's lived overseas since he was one, over in
Oh,
Wales and Hong Kong. So he's I just want to reconnect him to the family, and him to understand a bit more. So he's going to go to university back in New Zealand next year. So it's great for him to just be able to reconnect with family, but to New Zealand as well, and the culture and the heritage that is there.
man, as Pacific people, faith is a big part of our lives, and I'm just interested to see how it's kind of anchored you and how it's informed your decisions and the discipline, obviously, that you've had and the success that you've attained.
Yeah, it's a massive part of my life, my faith. And for me, that stemmed from my grandparents, both sides, my mum and my dad's, and my mum as well. Went to obviously a Catholic school in Francis Douglas, and went to a Catholic primary school before that there. So I was always around and involved in the faith. And for me, it is me. A lot of the things that I do based around things like sport, like in terms of the teamwork and things like that. But a lot of the values and a lot of the areas where I get strength from is through my faith. And that, for me, that's an important part that I'm very fortunate enough to have grown up in a Christian home, and to understand that and be in an environment, a rugby environment where they're very similar values, especially in that Pacific Island team. And when you're with the Fijian team, or you're always doing a lotu before the for dinner, and you're always doing looking at the Bible and reading that, and that sort of just strengthens you as an individual, but as a team as well. It binds you together, and I think that's one of the amazing things of the Pacific Island teams is after they bash the heck out of each other in a game, they're all getting together in those circles. I can sort of see those images after games and praying and giving glory to God. I think that's such an amazing thing to do in professional sport, and in team sport, to be able to strip away everything else and understand that faith is the most important thing and what put you there in the first place.
Yeah, I don't know if there's anything more powerful for me anyway on a sporting field when the Fijian team start off by singing the hymn. And, even though I can't even understand the language, I just understand the notion or the desire to praise God in that moment that you're about to, represent your country, and there's massive emotion and there's lots on the line, and man, there they are preparing through their faith to do this thing, which is yeah, it's powerful every time I see it. And I remember the Reds went over from here from Queensland to play in Fiji, I think, and they learnt the song and they all sang the song back. And a lot of people and a lot of teams are learning that hymn, and it's just a great way of, I don't know, evangelizing and sharing our faith in who we are. So
Yeah, 100% agree with that. Yeah, definitely.
cool, man. I just want to finish off in your captaincy. You captained your nation. How did that feel emotionally? And then how did you deal with that?
Yeah, it's when you're taking on that leadership thing. When they asked me, I jumped at the chance. I felt very obviously privileged and honoured to be able to do it, but with that privilege comes responsibility and pressure. But pressure is a privilege. So being in that privileged situation is important. And for me, it was just about making sure that as a leader. Leadership's always about leading others, but for me, it's about leading yourself first. So as a leader, you need to make sure that you got your own house in order before you go and look to lead others. And I think that's a big important part of being a leader. But to be able to do that, take on that responsibility, you've got to have a good people around you, a good senior players, a good management, where that communication is so critical and so important. That was something that sort of grew over the years in terms of getting that synergy and that rapport with all those groups, and just being able to represent. And it is an emotional time. I remember just giving full of emotions, just giving the speech before the match, even the night before, because we're not playing for ourselves, and we're definitely not paying for the paycheck, but we're playing for the people back home. We're playing for those that are watching, that don't have much, if anything, and we'll understand, and we're giving hope. And to be in that position to give hope to those kids watching in that village is very daunting in lots of ways, but understanding that we are together, we are a brotherhood, that we are in the same direction, I think, and giving your best, given what God's given you. And sometimes you don't always choose the result or the path, and sometimes God will guide you some other direction or open up another door. So being able to have that faith to fall on when things are tough or when things are going well. I could tell you right now that the Fijian team, after beating England, they would have had their feet back on that ground. While others, may have been celebrating. They understood that was just a moment in time, and something that they are grateful for. But I think that's where the faith part comes in again, especially as a captain, to be able to live and breathe that.
Well, man, you seem like a dude who's had his feet on the ground all the way through, even through all your success on and off the field. You're really measured and you're really level-headed, and just feels like you're a continuous learner, a lifelong learner, and that's held you in good stead. It feels like you're never overwhelmed or really, we're talking about all your success in a really calm and measured way. And well, I'm just thinking, wow, man, that's awesome. That's awesome. You're like, yeah, and then I went there and I went there. So congratulations on your success, bro. And thank you for taking this time to reflect and have a chat, and really looking forward to the next chapters, especially the PhD and the initiatives that will come out of the PhD for especially Pacific rugby players across the globe.
I appreciate it. Thank you for the opportunity, and love what you're doing in terms of just bringing stories out to the public for people to see and to share.
Well, that's another episode. I always walk away from recording these podcasts feeling really inspired and better equipped to take on the future. I guess my number one thing that I reflect on in this conversation was how Deacon described being named captain of his country, Fiji, at the Rugby World Cup. In his words, he said pressure is a privilege, and I feel like he's continuously put himself under pressure throughout life, be it on the field or enrolling himself into the myriad of degrees that he's got, or even creating things like the Pacific Rugby Players Association. I feel like some of that was external pressure, but much of it was created by himself for his own continuous improvement. And it's because he knows that a high stakes pressured life is one that exists outside of the comfort zone. So what a guy. We wish Deacon and his wife and 3 kids all the best, and God's blessings over all of their future endeavours. Okay, so that's us for this week. Next week we'll have Ramachand, who's based in Georgia and contributing to their Rugby World Cup campaign too. He's a high performance coach and also a good mate of mine, so looking forward to bringing that one. For now though, thanks for listening. Please do us a favour and subscribe. and leave a review so we can really tailor what we're trying to do. But otherwise, have a great week and God bless.